Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today we're looking at the 2009 series Batman and Robin from DC Comics. It is difficult, to say the least, to cover Grant Morrison's run on Batman without covering all of it. And I mean basically everything that Morrison wrote for DC, from Final Crisis on through the end of the New 52 Batman Incorporated. Because all of the stories are so intertwined and full of both little moments and entire arcs that only really make sense after you've read all of it. And even then, no promises. And I'm sorry, but there's just no way I'm covering all of that right now. I'll probably try to get around to it at some point if this channel goes on for long enough, but for now I do still think it worth covering this series, both because one of you recommended it, and I pretty much do whatever you guys tell me to do, and because of the next series I want to cover for the New 52, which you guys can probably guess what that'll be. If you know any New 52 stuff anyway. So let me set the stage as best I can. In Final Crisis, the old New Gods villain, DarkSEED, made a bunch of failed clones of Batman. When he realized he couldn't use the clones to create the army of Batman he wanted, he instead sent the actual Batman into the distant past. Batman would then be filled with something called Omega Energy that he would gather up as he moved further and further forward in time, with the idea that he would end the universe should he ever return to the present. To keep the superheroes of Earth from figuring this all out, DarkSEED faked Batman's death using one of the clones. So with the world believing Batman dead, in Gotham we would have the Battle for the Cowl, as Jason Todd, the second Robin who died and came back as the anti-hero Red Hood, dressed up as Batman to try and give the city a new Dark Knight. The series would end with Dick Grayson, the original Robin and then current Nightwing, stopping Jason and accepting his new role as the actual new Batman. And Damian Wayne, son of Bruce Wayne, would become the Robin for Grayson's Batman. That would then lead to this brand new series with Morrison back in control, bringing us the new Batman story focused on the adventures of a brand new pair of Batman and Robin. So let's see if this new dynamic duo can live up to past incarnations and take this away. The comic opens on some criminals speeding away from the cops. Aw man, and their explosion they leave behind spells out its own sound effect? Now that's classy. Frank Quitely, who does the art for the first 3 issues, is going to be doing a lot of that, and I am here for it. While they are getting away from the cops, these criminals can't escape our brand new Batman and Robin, who show up in a flying Batmobile thanks to changes Damian made on the vehicle based on plans Bruce had drawn up before dying. The new duo capture the leader of these drug dealers, one Mr. Toad. I guess Rat, Mole, and Badger weren't able to stop him from Breaking Bad after all. Toad seems to have been paid in dominoes. Those will continue to be important throughout the series, but for now it's mostly ignored as the GCPD take Toad into custody. Not too long after that, Dick and Damian head off to meet with Commissioner Gordon for the first time as Batman and Robin, arriving just as the police station comes under attack. The attack comes from what seems to be a circus freak show, comprised of what seems to be conjoined triplets and a bearded lady, I guess. There's also a man on fire and they killed a guy with a trident. Okay, maybe that last part didn't happen, but while Batman and Robin do attempt to intervene to moderate success, with Damian wanting to do his own thing instead of working as part of a team, cause, you know, kids. Even though the attack is stopped, Toad still ends up dead somehow. And in Toad's hand is another domino, the Double 12, as we'll eventually learn. Back at the Batcave, Dick is furious at Damian for not working with him and being disrespectful of the cops. But Damian's just like, "You're not my real dad!" And he quits as Robin and runs off on his own. As Grayson had noticed, the Freak Show members and Toad had all used circus slang, as they were members of a group called Le Cirque de Strange, or Circus of Strange, since I suck at French accents. So Damian heads to an abandoned circus, and there he's almost immediately overrun by a bunch of freakish looking people working for a guy wearing a pig face. This is Professor Pig. Pig with a Y, and this series is actually his first appearance. Though, in actuality, the first mention of him was in that possible future we saw in issue 666 of Batman during Morrison's run on that 2 years before this. But that's not really important. My point is, Pig fits so well into Batman's rogue gallery that I always forget he's not an older character than this. Pig is a truly psychopathic individual. He's obsessed with perfection, but his idea of perfection is not one anyone would recognize. In an attempt to achieve it in humans, he cuts people up to change them and puts these masks on them, turning them all into these freakish things he calls Dolatrons. He also has a freakish structure of wood and barbed wire that he calls his mother and who he believes talks to him. And perhaps most disturbing of all, he explains himself to Damian while dancing to music he calls sexy disco hot. In the video game Batman Arkham Knight, they'll change his genre of choice to opera, but honestly I'm not sure anything would be freakier than a psychopath dancing badly to disco music. That's definitely the musical choice of crazy people. Come at me. Earlier we saw a girl named Sasha and her father be kidnapped to be turned into more of those Dolatrons by Pig. But before Sasha can undergo the full transformation, cursed only to be stuck with a freakish Dolatron face, Damian breaks free from his captivity and rescues her. Before they get out of Pig's pen, though, Sasha catches Pig on fire in revenge for what he did to her and her father. Pig freaks out and flees, and Damian follows him instead of staying with Sasha, who is pulled away by more of the Dolatrons. Grayson shows up right then, having followed his own trail of clues to bring him here, and having some clarity thanks to Alfred and his feelings of inadequacy in taking Bruce's place, both as Batman and as Damian's mentor. So instead of being angry with Damian, he compliments his self-sufficiency. They put a quick stop to Pig's plans, the prof is arrested by the GCPD, and Grayson explains that Pig had developed a weaponized flu that created an overwhelming sense of drug addiction in those who caught it. More on that later. Disturbingly though, Pig had the 12 and 11 domino, seeming to indicate a countdown is happening and that Pig was not the mastermind here, but instead just another pawn in the game. From there we move on to seeing a guy calling himself Lightning Bug, cause he has electricity powers, you see. And he's busy attacking someone when he's interrupted by Batman and Robin. He attempts to run away, giving the pair the slip, or so it seems, until he runs into them again in the dark. Only it turns out that he's actually run into the Red Hood and Scarlet. Scarlet is Sasha, still with the Dolatron face stuck to her own, as Red Hood had sought her out to be his own vigilante sidekick. Red Hood, then, of course, is Jason Todd, back to his ruthless ways of gunning down criminals. Or, well, slicing necks in this particular case, adding in a new catchphrase of "let the punishment fit the crime," as he appeals to the social media generation with Scarlet live tweeting out the murder. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess it's called Xing now? Excreting? Whatever. Damian and Grayson learn of his return when he attempts to gun down a meeting of Gotham crime bosses that Batman and Robin were surveilling. They intervene just in time to save the Penguin's miserable life, and the two teams have a brief fight that ends more or less in a stalemate, with Hood and Scarlet just running away. Bats manages to track them down again almost immediately, but this time Hood and Scarlet manage to get the upper hand when Scarlet guilts Robin for abandoning her at Pig's Carnival, allowing her to get a cheap shot in on Damian that distracts Grayson long enough for Red Hood to knock him out. Hood ties up the duo in a chair in front of a webcam, offering the internet to see the pair unmasked if enough people call into a number to activate the webcam. I can't be positive here, but I can't help but feel like this is a deliberate reference to the number DC set up back in the day during the Death in the Family story, where people could call in to vote if they wanted Jason Todd to be killed off or not. A vote that Jason lost, and thus we got the conclusion to that story that has now become so famous in Batman history. And yet, somehow his annoying presence still haunts comics to this very day. The webcam does get activated, but by then Batman and Robin have already escaped and are dressed again, and Damian shames everyone for trusting in an obviously inferior Robin. But Hood had only really intended this as a distraction anyway, while he and Scarlet got away. Unfortunately for them, before they really get anywhere at all, they immediately come under attack by a guy with the incredibly frightening, terrifying villain name of Flamingo. Ooh. The purpose of that meeting of mob bosses that we saw earlier was to discuss the arrival of this guy Flamingo, who had been called in by someone named El Penitente in order to deal with Red Hood. Flamingo is another villain that was mentioned in issue 666 of Batman, just like Pig. And also like Pig, he's an absolutely deranged psychopath who murders people and eats their faces? But unlike Pig, he ain't sticking around. Because after Batman and Robin show up to rescue Hood and Scarlet, Hood takes advantage of the distraction in order to operate some heavy machinery and squash Flamingo before burying him under a pile of rubble. Yikes. But while he may not stick around for long, his brief fight leaves a lasting impact. Scarlet runs away, Robin is shot in the spine and paralyzed from the waist down, and Jason is so badly injured that the police are able to arrest him and take him away. But while he's being taken away, he criticizes Grayson for not having taken Bruce's body to a Lazarus pit to resurrect him. Grayson at first seems to dismiss the idea, but then he does exactly that. While Damian is returned to his mother to undergo some experimental spine replacement procedure in some kind of Bacta-tank looking thing, Dick heads to the UK to team up with Knight and Squire to get to a Lazarus pit below a mine deep in the earth. There they run across Batwoman, who had also come to Great Britain as part of her own investigation following the religion of crime, who ended up knocking her out and kidnapping her in the hopes of sacrificing her towards a prophecy of doom that would involve a monster rising from the Lazarus pit. And while they didn't quite manage to sacrifice her, a monster does rise from the pit, because while they thought they were putting Batman's body in there, once it comes out, it's quickly apparent to Dick that the thing they're dealing with is not Batman. And it's definitely not, as we already know by now, that it's instead one of DarkSEED's failed copies. Not Batman attacks the gathered heroes, leading to a long and difficult to follow Batman vs. Batman fight. But before they can manage to stop him, the crime boss that runs the mine sets off some bombs, burying them all inside. The fake Bat alone manages to escape, but Batwoman is crushed under the rubble. She asks Grayson to revive her in the Lazarus pit, and then she dies, leaving Dick without much choice but to accept her final request. And I guess fulfilling that plan to sacrifice her after all. This all works out perfectly fine, with Batwoman not even suffering the normal insanity side effects of the Lazarus pit because she's just so tough, I guess. The Batphony has enough of his memories to return back home to Wayne Enterprises, and there attacks Alfred and the still recovering Damian. Damian is supposed to take it easy on his new spine, but true to any superhero story, he's not given the chance as the fake Batman attempts to kill both him and Pennyworth. But luckily, Batwoman's death didn't slow her or Grayson down too much, and they arrive in time to rescue Damian and finish off the bad guy. Not that they end up having to do a whole lot, because the Batfake simply melts away before their eyes, ruined by whatever it was that caused all of Darkseid's Bat copies to fail. Okay, it was Bruce's memories, according to the conversation that happened in the tie-in to Final Crisis. Those memories proved to be too much for any normal human body to handle, so now you know, I guess. Anyway, this whole event has finally made Grayson realize that Bruce must really be alive, which Tim Drake has been saying for a while, but everyone was like, "No, Tim, you're stupid." Well, who's stupid now, Grayson? Huh? With this revelation, they begin seeing clues all around Wayne Manor that Bruce, trapped in the past, has left for them, as you would see if you were also reading Batman: The Return of Bruce Wayne at the same time as this. Following those clues leads Dick to a literal underground railroad that supposedly was part of the actual Underground Railroad, and to other stuff like a weird-ass giant bat statue and a special box that is somewhat inexplicably important in Return of Bruce Wayne. While he's down there though, Damian is attacked in the family graveyard on the estate by a group called the 99 Fiends, all named for a specific demon from history. Damian gets some unexpected help, though, from a guy named Oberon Sexton, a British writer and detective who has made several small appearances throughout the series so far, and has been revealed to be investigating the Black Glove. I may have talked about Black Glove some in some other Morrison stories I've covered. To put it as quickly as I can, it's an evil organization run by Bruce's ancestor Thomas Wayne, the immortal guy who has been posing as a guy named Dr. Hurt and serving as a mastermind villain, always plotting to destroy Bruce Wayne throughout Morrison's entire Batman run, including being the villain behind the scenes of most of what has happened in this series, though for most of that time he's been going by the name El Penitente. Sexton had already warned Grayson Batman earlier in this series that the Black Glove might be targeting Bruce Wayne, and that there might even be some kind of connection between Black Glove and the Waynes. And I guess those killer instincts are what brought him to the Wayne family cemetery for this moment. Damian and Oberon fend off the fiends, but when Batman emerges from the Wayne family crypt with the Bat Box, Damian suddenly switches to attacking Grayson. It seems that new spine of his came with a caveat: some special technology that allows Talia, his mom, to control him from a distance. Or anyone to control him, really, as Talia has Deathstroke take the controls in order to finish off Grayson. But Deathstroke gets arrogant, pushing the controls to the limit so he can taunt Grayson with who is going to be his assassin. Grayson responds by attempting to stop Damian's heart, and the feedback through the system causes exactly that to happen to Deathstroke. While they're distracted, the fiends make off with the box, but Batman and Robin don't much care. Instead, they head across the planet to confront Talia, and there she offers Damian one last chance to come back to her and rule the world. Damian refuses, wanting to be more like his dad, and so Talia declares him an enemy of the Al Ghuls and shows him his replacement, a second baby. Essentially a clone of Damian, being bred to be a perfectly obedient son instead of disobeying her like Damian has. Damian's response of, "Can't you just love me for who I am, not who you want me to be?" is just so damn heartbreaking. I know it's easy to forget, but Damian is only 10 years old. In the end, he's just a vulnerable little kid wishing he had parents that love him. Instead, he has the absolute worst parents ever. When they return from meeting with Talia, Grayson goes to confront Sexton. Damian had noticed in the graveyard that Sexton's British accent was fake, but Damian was thinking Sexton might secretly be Bruce Wayne in disguise. Grayson has also realized Sexton is a fake, but he's managed to put all the pieces together to realize that Sexton is actually the Joker. The real Oberon Sexton was murdered by the Joker before this comic started, and Joker then buried Sexton in the same grave as Mrs. Sexton, who Sexton himself had apparently murdered. Circles? But believe it or not, despite literally killing his way into their good graces, Joker is not the bad guy here. Well, okay, he's not the villain here. I mean, sort of. It'll become clear in a bit. He says that after Batman died, something inside of him also died, and he just doesn't have the same desire to be the Clown Prince of Crime anymore. Instead, he desires to help Batman and Robin solve their Black Glove problem. And they do have a Black Glove problem. Cause you remember that virus that Pig created? The one that caused drug withdrawals as its symptoms and that I said I'd get back to later? Well, now it's later. And it's reached pandemic levels within the city. And that's caused the populace to devolve into rioting. Thomas Wayne, or Dr. Hurt, or El Penitente, or whatever you want to call him, breaks Pig out of jail to have him capture Commissioner Gordon and lead the rioting through a deadly parade across the city. And meanwhile, he reveals himself to the world pretending to be Bruce Wayne's father, a claim he has actually made before, though not nearly as publicly, and then goes home to Wayne Manor. Joker is taken into custody meanwhile because no one actually believes him that he wants to help. Especially not Damian, who confronts him in his holding cell with a crowbar, attempting to pull an inverse of the confrontation between Joker and the Jason Todd Robin in Death in the Family. But Joker always has a trick up his sleeve, and a paralytic toxin in one of his fingernails allows him to take Damian hostage. But while Joker does mess with Damian's mind some, doing things like dressing him as a clown and talking a bunch of nonsense about bananas, he does end up bringing Damian to Wayne Manor, seemingly proving his sincerity about helping. Grayson, though, realizes the Joker's really just at war with Thomas Wayne for control of Gotham. And while Joker holds Damian captive, Grayson has no choice but to help Joker's fight. So Grayson attempts to deal with Pig and the rioting, but between the crazed civilians, Pig's Dolatrons, and Commissioner Gordon's own succumbing to the virus leading him to taking a cheap shot on Batman, Grayson gets overwhelmed. Doc Hurt brings him to Wayne Manor, and Damian, released by the Joker to help Grayson, is unable to fight through all of the 99 Fiends by himself and gets captured as well. Thomas Wayne then has some plan involving them and that box that his men stole earlier, but the box suddenly opens on its own, revealing that all it contains is a bat tracker and a note saying, "Gotcha." While he's distracted by this, Grayson and Damian get a sucker punch on him, and then everything comes to a head with the sudden appearance of Batman? Yep, it's Bruce Wayne back from the dead, or the past, or the whatever, and ready to kick some bad guy butt once again. Though not before complaining that Damian is in a Robin costume. It bothers me so much that that's basically the first thing he says to his own son. That's your kid, bro. He thought you were dead. You couldn't say something nice? God, you're like Worf levels of bad dad. Doc Hurt runs away while the three heroes deal with the 99 Fiends. Bruce gives chase eventually, but Hurt placed Alfred in a death trap in order to ensure his escape just in case something went terribly wrong with his plan. And that does prove to be enough of a distraction to Bruce to let Thomas get away. Only, while leaving, T. Wayne runs across Joker. But instead of a fight, he simply slips on that banana pill Joker had left behind earlier while taunting Robin. It all came back around. Who's crazy now? Joker then proceeds to bury Thomas alive, and that's pretty much the last we'll see of that character. Bruce does catch up in time to knock out Joker before he can get away. While all of this was happening at the manor, Damian and Grayson had gone back out into Gotham to take care of Pig. With that plot quickly put to an end, Bruce Wayne announces he's going to be doing things differently from now on. And not just for his sons, but for the entire world. Because this is where he announces that he's going to be starting Batman Incorporated. That leads into a special issue that goes about doing a lot of the setup for the Batman Incorporated series. This includes introducing Leviathan, mentioning Internet 3.0, our first glimpse of the robot Batman, and the disgusting birth from a giant whale thing in a tank of Damian's twisted evil brother. It also sees Bruce attempt his first outing with Damian at his side before deciding that he can't trust Damian to be his Robin. Damian had been expecting this, assuming Bruce returning to life would be the end of him and Grayson as Batman and Robin. But instead, Bruce says they should continue at the job together, so Bruce can focus on recruiting for Batman Incorporated. And it's off to Japan with Selena Kyle so that series can begin. At this point, Morrison leaves the title, and we get a rotating group of creative teams who finish off the series. The first of these stories sees Grayson and Damian facing off against Una Nemo, a former girlfriend of Bruce Wayne's, who got tired of him keeping her at arm's length and left him. She ends up being killed when some robbers show up to a boat party that she's at and shoot her in the head. Only it turns out she somehow magically survived. It seems she has a condition called Dandy Walker syndrome, which is nothing like this in real life, but in the comic they say it means her head is mostly hollow and her brains are actually all along the outside of her skull. So a single bullet wasn't able to do enough damage to her brain to actually kill her. In fact, just the opposite. The increased flow of oxygen to her brain has increased her intelligence, making her a brilliant foe who is always one step ahead of the dynamic duo. She has some revenge kick planned for Bruce Wayne that involves possibly, but actually not really, killing a bunch of his ex-girlfriends, as she's angry that he didn't warn her when she was dead. Though that was because he was essentially dead at the time as well, which she doesn't know. It doesn't really matter anyway, because the whole revenge plan on Bruce was really just a distraction for Batman and Robin, as her men carried out the real revenge plan on the robbery crew that was responsible for her own false death, as her people gave each of the robbers their own holes in their heads. From there, we get what's probably my personal favorite arc of the entire series, as our heroes face off against this glowing guy calling himself the White Knight, whose plan to bring light to Gotham involves targeting the family members of the various Rogues Gallery villains that have been locked up in Arkham Asylum over the years. Using some drug-enhanced mind control, he forces these various family members to commit suicide in various ways, in order to ensure that they are unable to add further pain into the world, presumably assuming that they'll go as insane as their villainous family relation. I'm always a sucker for expanding the mythology of Gotham City, and getting to see the families of Arkham inmates is just kind of fun. White Knight eventually takes his fight to Arkham itself, but Grayson and Damian show up to stop him before he can kill any of the inmates. villains, though I do enjoy Damien's hesitation when it comes to saving the bad guys. I also super enjoy that Grayson fires his bat ears into White Knight's face. He can do that? Those things have a use? Love it. No notes. Next, we see the return of Red Hood, in a story that feels like setup for his New 52 series. Jason's now in prison after having been taken away by the cops as we last saw him, but he doesn't mind, as it's a chance for him to live out his Rorschach fantasies by killing off the other inmates that are, trapped in there with him. He's eventually broken out of jail by some animal people calling themselves the Menagerie, who are acting for mostly unclear reasons. It seems their boss, this lady, wants Jason for something, but we're never really told what that something is. But she wants him for it so much that she's actually managed to kidnap Scarlet and is holding her hostage until he agrees to work for her. Batman and Robin interrupt the jailbreak though, and after learning what's going on, briefly agree to work with Red Hood in order to rescue Scarlet, which they do almost immediately, and Jason and Scarlet manage to get away, running off into the sunset, never to be seen again. The final issue of the series isn't actually in the collected editions, which sucks, but I grabbed it anyway cause that's what I do. It sees Grayson and Damien in France working alongside French Batman Incorporated member Night Runner, as they deal with a problem at the Louvre and crimes based off of famous paintings. It will turn out that the mastermind here is a French version of the Joker, who calls himself the Man Who Laughs, and has his face disfigured like this due to his father being a generally evil person who was inspired by Victor Hugo's novel The Man Who Laughs, and decided that that was how he wanted his son to look. And so in return, this Man Who Laughs cuts his father up into little pieces that he keeps living in some tank somewhere, forced to watch his son's crimes for the rest of eternity. Yeah, that's weird. And the end of the series, so let's just get to the breakdown. I'm sorry, but I am just not the biggest fan of Morrison's Batman. I think there is something cool about how Morrison's Batman stories are mysteries inside of mysteries that slowly unravel across the span of several years, so that once you've read all of them, you can kind of go back through and catch a lot of the stuff that made no sense the first time and realize what was actually going on. That is some legitimate high-level thinking and can be impressive and interesting in its own right. But the downside is that if you try to read any individual story, it all feels like a big massive mess of nonsensical insanity at worst, or that you're reading incomplete stories at best. I do enjoy the relationship Damien and Grayson build in this series. Pig is a perfect addition into Batman's rogues gallery, as I've mentioned, and this comic does provide a lot of resolution to various storylines started by Morrison during Batman, as the move into Batman Incorporated is largely the start of new storylines and plots, so many things had to come to an end here. And the art during Morrison's run, with I feel just one notable exception, is all pretty top-notch. Post-Morrison, the comic's quality sways pretty far up and down, with a lot of it feeling like the filler it was probably intended to be while waiting for the start of the New 52. Una Nemo feels like a generic brand knockoff of the relationship Bruce had with Jezebel Jet, the Red Hood story felt kind of pointless, and the White Knight and Man Who Laughs stories are pretty interesting but hardly landmark. So what that leaves is me giving this series a recommendation level of medium. It's hard for me to recommend this series since it relies so heavily on other Morrison-written Batman comics, and I think that causes it to lose a lot of the potential the series would have had otherwise if they had made it more standalone. The collected editions get 1. Domino, and 3. Diegetic sound effects. Ooh, say that 5 times fast. That's moving from bad to good, but nothing too bad. Dominoes are fun after all. I recommend Mexican Train. It's good times. That breaks down like this. The 3 Morrison volumes are crammed with yummy extras that include a bonus cover gallery and various artwork, with Morrison giving a personalized explainer and breakdown of all of it. Volumes 1 and 2 are also both 6 issues, and while Volume 3 is only 4 issues, it does have that bonus special issue that makes it only a little shorter in total page length than the other 2. Volume 4 is an entire 9 issues, which is pretty impressive, even if it does lose points for having no other special features and not collecting the final issue, which as far as I can tell has remained uncollected to this day. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. More Batman and Robin is on the way, in case you couldn't tell. I hope everyone's having a happy Thanksgiving break if, you know, you're in America and you celebrate that kind of thing. I mean, at least it's probably some days off of work or something. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, or you're looking forward to future videos, or you're just a really cool person who likes to click a lot of buttons, then make sure to do all the YouTube things so you can be sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.